It seems like such a long time ago when November 2016, when Donald Trump was elected to the presidency of the United States. But it didn't take members of the legacy media and the opposition party, that is the media, and the Democrats working together to strike up a drumbeat. Everybody was playing off the same page, singing from the same hymn book. Everybody was in the press was talking about all these racial incidents that were happening because of Trump. The reasoning went like this. Trump is a racist. Well, how do you know that? Well, he's a racist because his followers are all racist. Well, how do we know his followers are racist? Well, we know they're racist because they like Trump. And around and around and around and it went. And all of a sudden, all these groups started publishing all these bogus studies of all these bogus hate crimes that the local and national reporters could not pick up eagerly enough. They could not talk about them in depth enough on the Sunday talk shows. All theory, very, very, very few things happened. But what did happen was there were a lot of people, a lot of Trump supporters who were actually victims of violence. We did on video. We did a lot of those around here. I keep thinking of that one guy in the intersection, stopped by a bunch of the fellas. He's wearing a Trump hat. They mock him. They scorn him. They beat him, all because he's a Trumpster. I guess it's worth reminding that when somebody is beat because they're wearing a Trump hat, that beating is kind of administered to every single one of those people in this country who thought Trump was a much, much, much better alternative to Hillary Clinton. But anyway, so that story went on and on, all over the country. New York Times, Washington, all over the world. New York Times, Washington Post, the Bye-Bye Say. And of course, all the regular magazines, all the liberal magazines, Nation and Salon. It was just the drum beat did not stop. One of the people leading the drumbeat was the Anti-Defamation League. I think it used to be called the Jewish Anti-Defamation League. Anyway, it's a group of Jewish activists who don't want anybody going around slandering Jewish people. But they were the ones, the ADL and the Southern Poverty Law Center, they were the ones out there banging the drum the loudest, getting the most attention to their cause, getting the most attention to their organization, getting the most money to flow in to their fundraising efforts. The ADL was second to nobody in talking about this Trump hate hysteria that was sweeping the country following Trump's election. The one thing I remember, but a lot of them turned out to be hoaxes. The favorite hoax I remember was some Trump-supporting terrorist, white supremacist, was calling or faxing or sending messages to Jewish community centers all over the country, threatening them with all these bad things. I think more than 100 Jewish community centers got these threats. Each and every one of them had a big rally right up the street from my house and go to Wilmington, Delaware. The local U.S. Senator Chris Coons, he was the guest speaker at a rally for 500,000 people. Lots of them carrying anti-Trump signs, lots of them carrying anti-Trump hatred in their hearts, reminding everybody that we're not going to stand for this anti-Semitism just because Trump is out there spreading it around. Yeah, well, you guys remember how that story ended up, right? It was one of the fellas who did it. For crazy reasons of his own. It was one of the fellas who did it, and the very same newspapers who splashed this on page 1 buried that story either at the bottom of their stories or in page 20 when they figured out it was not some kind of pro-Trump, pro-Trump, pro-racism conspiracy directed at Jewish people and black people. Well, the same thing happened again in the same town. I think that fella came from St. Louis, and a lot of the threats against Jewish people came from St. Louis. Then a few weeks after that went down, they had something else happen. They had like over 100 gravestones in a Jewish cemetery turned over, broken. Many were broken. And all of a sudden, the exact same drum beat started again. Papers all over the world started reminding everybody that, you know what? We might not know Trump was there, but ever since Trump got in, we've had lots and lots of reports that Trump people are racist and Trump is racist and they're all getting together to do all sorts of bad things to black people and Jewish people. And this is just the latest example. Trump even sent Vice President, I almost said Assistant President, Vice President Mike Pence down. Then he sent, there's the governor of Missouri, who who's in a bit of a jam now, probably not caused by him. And then behind him is one of the Jewish activists who's helping fix the cemetery, and behind her is a member of the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, who's been out there ever since Trump was elected, reminding everybody that Trump's behind all this crazy anti-Jewish, anti-black hatred. That was a year ago. And my favorite thing when something bad happens like this at this Jewish cemetery, we kind of see it happening now, and they'll say, well, Trump has been criticized for not being vocal enough in condemning the destruction at the cemetery. That's kind of like Mueller's, and it's kind of like Comey's. Well, we can't prove he didn't do it. That was enough for the reporters. They took it, they ran with it. And the Trump people were very aware of it. That's why they sent Pence and the governor down there to hold hand, make plans. You'll notice you don't see any black people in the audience, just a bunch of white people at this Jewish cemetery. Anyway, you guys probably figured out who did it by now. Probably heard who did it. This guy did it. And by the way, not only did he do it, not only did they figure out did he do it, he confessed to it. Well, they pretty much decided that this black on Jewish violence at the cemetery had nothing to do with race or hatred or anything. How we know that? Because we strapped some of these things on his brain that helps us read his mind. So the same crowd that was absolutely convinced that the Trump people were spewing hatred at Jewish people and black people a year ago, they catch one of the fellas again involved in the exact same kind of hoax. And everybody all of a sudden decides this has nothing to do with anything. It's just a big, fat coincidence. Wow. Just like this is a coincidence. Up in New York, this happened last night in New York City. Somebody knocks on the door. An old white dude answers the door. This is what happens. That's reality. Lots and lots of stories in the New York papers now saying, hey, has anybody heard about all these black on Jewish violence in Williamsburg, down where the Orthodox and kind of fundamentalist Jewish people live? Anybody heard about that? Everybody's shrugging their shoulders going, wow, that's really terrible. I hadn't heard about that. The only reason you haven't heard about it is because, if you haven't, is because you are so determined to be in denial, deceit, and delusion about it. We've done a ton about it here. Nobody has written and documented and done videos more than good old Colin about black on Jewish hostility, hatred, and violence. Nobody. And Williamsburg is kind of ground zero for that. And yet the papers, as early as latest this morning, our good buddy John Legend is out there again, reminding everybody that Trump is a big, bad racist. Trump supporters are big, bad racists. When is all this going to stop? When are white people going to stop calling the cops on black people for no reason whatsoever? When? How about when black people stop knocking on old white people's doors and beating the crap out of them and stealing their wallet? How about that, John Legend? And we don't give a damn how many black kids that makes angry.